Hi, good morning. Today I'm going to teach you how to do a Gollar. This is a Gollar that I made for a friend of mine, Suzanne, for an award. It is wool on the outside, silk on the inside, and it is edged with faux fur. You will also see that it has embroidery on it. The embroidery was done before this Gollar was made. Gollar, G-O-L-L-A-R, is a German word for a short cape. So join me please and learn how to make one of these wonderful pieces of clothing. So this is the front. You can see the shoulder seam, you can see the neck, and you can see the front. It's supposed to be open. So I've cut 2 pieces of coat weight wool for the outside, 2 pieces of silk taffeta for the lining. This is the back. Again, you can see the curve of the neck and you can see the curve of the shoulder. This is cut on the fold, and I've cut 1 piece of coat weight wool for the outside and 1 piece of silk taffeta for the inside. The other thing that you need to cut for this particular Gollar is fur, and this fur is going to line the edge of the Gollar, and you need to cut it the amount of the pattern, whatever shape fits you. I'm going to start by sewing together the lining piece. This is the back. And I'm going to align this right there. You can see that my front and back shoulder seams don't exactly end in the same place. That is the that's the side effect of making your own patterns. They are not as perfect as something that you would get from a commercial pattern. And I don't mind at all because I'll just fix that when I'm trimming. Back, I'm going to sew the shoulders. Video fail bingo. We just checked the box of a siren driving by the house. One sewing tip that I want to point out is that when I do pin my pieces together, I put my pins like this because then I can sew here and I don't have to worry about removing pins as I'm sewing. I was taught to pin like that, but you shouldn't sew over top of pins. It's bad for your needle and it's unsafe. If you hit a pin, it can shatter. The needle can shatter, or the pin can shatter and fly up and get you. That's the lining sewn together. Now I'm going to sew together the outside of the Gollar. This particular Gollar is a cloak for a friend of mine. Before the piece was cut out, I sent this away to my friend Vadoma in Utah, and she embroidered this pelican in its piety on the piece of fabric so that it will be on the outside of the Gollar as decoration. because this is embroidered, now there is a right side and a wrong side, and you have to make sure that you sew this together correctly. So this matches this, and this side matches this side. I'm going to go to the iron and I'm going to press these seams open. The next step is going to be adding the fur trim. What I've done is I've cut a strip of fur. It's about 2 inches wide, maybe 2.5. And I'm going to fold it in half. And I'm going to baste it to the edge of the Gollar. This is the right side of the Gollar. I've joined the two furs because I didn't have a long enough strip of fur. So that join, I believe I'm going to put that at the back of the neck. Start pinning at the back of the neck. Now this is going to be pinned with the pins this way, which means I'm going to have to remove the pins as I sew. You want to make sure that if you make fur trim like this, that you've got a fairly good quality fur that's bendy, because I'm going around curves here. And that it's not too thick. If this was thick, it would be too difficult to fold it in half and to get it to stay in place. I mentioned that I hate working with fur. Yeah, I think I've mentioned that before. It's just so fussy. I think the wisest option at this point is to use my walking foot, which is for going over thicknesses of fabric like this and making sure that they don't get bunched up. I'm not going to join these pieces together until most of the fur is sewn on, because fur crawls, which means it just wants to get out of place where you've pinned it down. Sometimes that makes it stretch a little bit. Sometimes it gathers together a little bit. You never know how it's going to act until you sew on it, and I want to leave myself some room for challenges later in the project. So I've set my stitch length to a large length because this is just basting the fur into place before we add the lining to the Gollar. And remember, I am removing pins before I'm sewing. I'm not going over pins with my needle. Here we go. What's happened? When I said fur crawls, this is what I meant. So this was all pinned down, ready to go. And as I've just sewn just a little bit from the back, center back all the way to here, you can see that the fur has just crawled right out of place. So I have to either repin this, or I just have to remove the pins as I go and just hold the fur in place with my hands very, very carefully. Yeah, okay. The seam allowance is pretty good. And you can see the curve where we didn't take the fur all the way into the corner of the wool. We just come around in a curve. And that'll be what it looks like when the lining is in. That's fine. Now I need to repin this. I can't keep going like this. That's as far as I'm going to pin it. I'm going to sew for a little bit, and then I'm going to have to readjust again, I'm sure. Time to repin some more. Now let's check and see what this looks like. Okay. Alright. So I'm going to join the sections of fur in the back. Now that most of the unruly behavior is done. So what I have to do is join these two sections. So that when I fold them in half, eventually they will match the width we're trying to still cover. So the best way to do this is just have them meet in the middle. You know where you want your seam to be is where they're folded back. So we're just going to pin this first. So I'm aiming for this pin here. Again, we're using only basting stitches, so if something goes wrong, we can fix it fairly easily. How does that look? Not too bad. I'm just going to cut off the excess. Pin this in place. And baste it down. Okay, we have the edges of the weight coat wool decorated with fur. Now we're going to add the lining. And all the struggling that you just saw going on with getting this fur on correctly is why you don't sandwich the lining, the fur, and the wool all together as one and sew it, because it would be a very train wrecky situation. Now before I sew in the lining, I'm going to press these seams open. I'm going to pin the lining, the right side of the lining, to the right side of the Gollar. And I have to pin this into place over top of the fur, cognizant that the fur is rounded here. We've cut off these corners so we could get the fur to lay correctly. Match the seam lines. You know what? I need to pin this from the other side, because when I sew, I'm going to want to make sure that I'm sewing just inside of that seam line. So I need to sew it from this side. Gosh, that fur is just making me so unhappy right now. I'm going to match these seam lines so I don't get way off track. So when you're sewing and lining, you need to have an opening left somewhere if you're going to turn the piece. So this is my opening. It's about the size of my hand, which means I can put my hand inside and turn the Gollar right side out. So let's check to make sure that we don't have any wrinkles pinned into the structure. It looks good. No wrinkles. Excellent. And now, continuing to use my walking foot, because now we have another thickness we've added in, I'm going to sew this together. Because it's so thick, I'm going to continue to use a large stitch. I'm not going to use a basting stitch, which is what this is, but I'll make it a little smaller. All right, and away we go. The lining is now attached to the Gollar, but before we trim anything away, we have to turn it right side out and make sure that there's no big goofs. It looks like it looks good. So let's turn it, see what it looks like. On hindsight, I should have made this opening a little bigger, but now we just push fabric out into the shape of the garment. Bugger. I don't like that curve, but I believe it will behave better once all that seam allowance inside is trimmed away and everything is pressed. Okay, time to trim and press. Boy, that's looking a little train wrecky. When you get to the section that has the opening that you're going to have to close by hand, you need to not trim away the green fabric or the lining. You can trim away the fur, but you have to leave the fabric so you have something to sew together. So the opening starts here, so I want to make sure that I don't cut past that pin. And the opening is here, so I don't want to cut before that pin. I'm going to have to add a new square to video fail bingo. The sound of my husband snoring upstairs. So you have to be really careful when you're trimming this fur away so that you don't cut too far down in. But this is so thick, we need to get rid of some of it. Alright, so I think we're ready to turn this right side out for the last time. Oh yeah, that made it better. Getting all that excess fabric off the seam lines really helped. So, all I have to do to close this up is pin this shut and stitch it closed. All this needs is a good press and a hook and eye for the closure, and we can call it a day. See you during the outro. So now you see what it takes to make one of these little capes. I hope you enjoyed the journey today, and come back and join me next time for another new project. Bye!